Hey everyone, or at least hey everyone that is still watching YouTube videos as the end of the year approaches. In this week's Linux and open source news video, we have Linus Torvalds talking about the future of Linux, and he seems pretty chill about it. We have Ubuntu pondering maybe dropping older CPUs made before 2015, and also talking about their plans with moving to Wayland only. And we have some performance benchmarks that seem to prove that Linux can actually beat Windows for gaming. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and most of you probably already know about it, but if you don't, all you have to remember is that it's your all-in-one solution to build and publish your own website. Even if you don't know anything about how to build a website and you don't know how to code, Squarespace just lets you get started in no time. You pick a template, you drag and drop the various blocks you want, you customize them with the various colors and themes, and you're good to go. And when you want to move forward and enrich your website with a bunch of other features, you can add a video gallery, an online store with online payments, or even a members-only area, and a lot more. And if you need a logo or you need a domain name, Squarespace can also help you with that. So if you need a new website and you don't know how to get started, just click the link in the description below or head over to squarespace.com/thelinuxexperiment and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So if you want to know more about the current state of Linux as a project and how it's going to move forward, Linus Torvalds held a talk at the Japanese edition of the Open Source Summit. First, we can apparently expect an update to the Linux kernel around Christmas, so version 6.7. But he also addressed maintainer fatigue, because it looks like kernel maintainers are pretty much drained nowadays, since they have to be available all the time to review other people's code and judge if what they're proposing is solid enough and future-proof enough, and then interact with other humans, which, as we all know, can be pretty exhausting. I mean, I love you all, but sometimes the comment section under my YouTube videos can be an exhausting place to look at, and that's only YouTube comments. I can barely imagine what it must be to review code that comes into one of the biggest open source projects in the world. Now, as Torvalds points out, people relationships are the hard part, especially since not all maintainers agree on where to go with specific issues and features. And the other aspect of that is that a lot of the current top kernel people will start hitting their 60s, which means that at some point they might want to retire, although Torvalds seems to think a lot of them will still stick around. But this is also addressed by implementing newer languages in the kernel. With the addition of Rust support, a lot of younger people were drawn in, and that was also part of the decision to add Rust support to the kernel. It wasn't just a technical move, although Torvalds says it did make sense on that front as well. He also talked about AI and said it's inevitable that at some point some AI-generated code will be submitted to the kernel. And he's not worried about it. He's saying it's just the next step in the road to automation, and that it's nothing new. He even says it can be a great help to identify the stupid bugs, which are the majority of bugs, where the pattern is incorrect or you forgot a semicolon. So he seems pretty chill about it. Funding is more than secured, the old guard is still sticking around, but can be replaced by newer people drawn in by newer languages, and AI-generated code will just be looked at as every other piece of code submitted. So yeah, it's nice to have something that is not all doom and gloom. It's pretty cool. Now, speaking of the kernel and drivers, it looks like Ubuntu is experimenting with requiring a relatively recent x86 CPU for future releases by only supporting the x86-64v3 feature level, meaning that you'd need a CPU that supports the AVX extensions. This would limit modern Ubuntu releases to CPUs released around 2015 and newer. They are looking at how many people still use older CPUs and at the performance benefits of optimizing for just this newer subset of hardware. But if it goes through, it means Ubuntu and its official derivatives won't be a suitable option for older hardware, and a lot of other distros that are based on it would either have to do some extra work to add back support for these, or just abandon older hardware as well. Interestingly, Red Hat and SUSE have both decided to stick to V2 of the architecture and to keep supporting these previous generations of CPUs. Ubuntu is thus offering an installer for this V3 only build, and if you want to try it out, you can report how much performance you gained, if any, if there were some broken things in there, or if there are some regressions. And it looks like they're taking a careful, data-supported route here, which I think is the best approach. I am all for having the best performance possible on my recent CPUs by dropping old code and by only using the recent extensions that probably do result in better performance, but also one of the main advantages of Linux is to save older hardware from the inevitable Windows rot or from the inability to upgrade to a newer version. And if we drop older CPUs, we're also dropping this ability, which would kinda suck. Now, on top of that, Ubuntu revealed their plans for 24.04, which is going to be their next LTS. So they will upgrade their Flutter engine, used to build their own apps, to use GTK4. They will better handle translations to avoid a repeat of the 23.10 incident, and they will add a network section in the security center to let users be less visible on the local network or to enable the firewall. They also talked about getting rid of X11 entirely, but they will not do it for 24.04. They want to ensure that the NVIDIA and Wayland combo works better before that, although this is still something they're looking at, so expect a future version of Ubuntu to ditch the old server. Now, it is inevitable that this will happen at some point, and it will have a ripple effect on all Ubuntu-based distros, which will have to build their own x.org packages if they want to keep that server available for users. But an LTS is obviously not the right place to do so. I would expect that to happen in 24.10 or maybe 25.04, maybe at the same time as Red Hat Enterprise Linux does the same move. Now, speaking of Wayland, it looks like users of LXQt will not miss that train. The Ubuntu developers, this being the LXQt spin of Ubuntu, talked about their plans as well for the 24.04 release, and they want to have an optional Wayland session available there. Although this will not be the default before the following release. So it makes sense, as 24.04 is an LTS, and as such you only want the most stable and well-tested stuff in there. LXQt has been working on porting their desktop from Qt 5 to Qt 6, in the same move that KDE has been doing, and they feel that in April 2024, their work will be in a good enough state that they can offer Wayland as an optional choice. Ubuntu developers also have more plans on top of that, like improving the Calamares installer by adding the minimal install option that interestingly will not ship snap support. They will also have an improved first boot screen, they'll have a GUI for Bluetooth, which they apparently lacked, they will have a config tool to change the login screen settings, so settings for SDDM, they will add new themes, and there are a few other usability improvements planned as well. And it's pretty interesting to see a relatively small spin of Ubuntu and a relatively small desktop getting on that train. Maybe they're benefiting from the work Plasma is doing, since LXQt is based on Qt and some of the KDE frameworks, but it does alleviate some of my concerns that smaller desktops would not be able to do this Wayland transition in time. Apparently they can. Now, we got some updates on the Cosmic desktop again this week, this time with the ability to right-click a title bar and get all the various options you might be used to, but also the one for making a window float if you're in tiling mode. The text editor was improved again, now letting you double or triple click text to select it, and you can now search through a project to find files. And you can also integrate Git in your project with the current status and diffs. Multi-monitor support has been improved as well to let you move entire workspaces to another display, and Windows can migrate between displays when you connect or disconnect an external monitor, with Windows remembering their place. They also fixed some bugs for X-Wayland support, since Cosmic will be Wayland only. On top of that, the wallpaper settings are now complete, you can now open multiple windows for the same app, high-resolution mouse scrolling is implemented, and there are some smaller improvements all around. These are good improvements, and it looks like they shifted to the polish phase. It doesn't look like they have major features to implement, they're just adding smaller options here and there, which means hopefully we might see a public alpha or beta really soon, maybe early next year. Now, as per KDE and GNOME, first, the Plasma 6 bug fixing work progresses, but they also added changes, as always, like merging the advanced power settings page of the settings into a sub-page of the main energy settings page. They're showing more devices in that same page with their battery levels, and they will better handle various cursor scaling factors. They also fixed 175 bugs, which this time actually brought the number of bugs down, despite the multiple reports from people testing the beta. So that's a pretty good indication that things are moving forward. There were also some performance improvements in the overview effect with smoother animations. GNOME also kept working at their various projects, as work for grouping notifications is almost complete, adaptive dialogues are starting to take shape, and the GNOME online accounts got support for WebDAV and OAuth 2.0. This means you should be able to log in to various online accounts without having to generate app passwords, and you can now more easily add stuff like Nextcloud in these online accounts as well, which is really cool. On top of that, Aviator, an app to encode videos in AV1, got some big performance boosts. Dagger is a new app that lets you view and edit GraphViz files. There's Prompt, yet another terminal app, this time focused on containers and immutable desktops. And Planify, which used to be called Planner, got a big update, now using libadwaita widgets everywhere and improving the look of the app. And I used to use this app a lot back when it was called Planner. It was an elementary OS app, but it now moved to being a libadwaita app. And if you ever used a Mac and OmniFocus, this is probably the closest thing we have on Linux to that. It's a really solid app, and even though I moved to AnyType now, I'm still pondering moving back to Planner, well, Planify, because it still looks pretty damn good. Okay, now let's finish this with the gaming news. First, if you're a Fortnite player, there are some bad news. They clearly stated they have no plans to work on a Linux version or even to support the Steam Deck, unless it has, as they say, tens of millions of users. Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic, said that he loves the Steam Deck hardware, note that he specified that, maybe implying he doesn't love the software, and he said he wishes they had tens of millions of users, at which point it would make sense to support it. Now, since Valve apparently has around 3 million decks in the wild, and we can probably add a few 100,000 Linux desktop gamers on top of that, we are not there yet, but I would be surprised if these numbers didn't go up soon. And obviously this is probably just the usual BS from Epic Games, because they actually did have a Mac port of Fortnite, and you're not going to be able to convince me that there were more than 3 million potential macOS gamers in the wild. They actually stopped supporting that macOS build when they got into a spat with Apple over the 30% commission, and that's probably the issue here. They don't want to bring Fortnite to the Steam Deck because that would mean bringing it to Steam, and that would mean giving a juicy 30% to Valve on any microtransaction or thing that they sold there. That's the real issue, not the number of users. If they developed a macOS port for obviously less than 3 million people gaming on Macs, then they would obviously have a port for the Steam Deck if they were sure that they could make as much money as they wanted on this platform. Now, we also got a new beta for Steam, notably improving performance when using remote play with NVIDIA GPUs and improving the scaling on the Steam Deck. And they also redesigned the Steam Workshop a bit to make it easier to find mods, to see the mods you're subscribed to sort them and find them more easily. There were also a few Linux-specific fixes, notably fixing an issue where Steam would download the Windows version of a game instead of the Linux version when it was available. And speaking of performance, it looks like Windows is getting beaten by Linux when it comes to gaming, at least in a recent performance test. A German site called Computerbase tested Arch, Nobara, and PopOS against Windows 11 across 5 recent games, and found that Nobara was the better performer overall and Windows 11 was the least efficient OS for games. The games tested were Cyberpunk 2077, Forspoken, the latest Ratchet & Clank game, Starfield, and the Talos Principle 2. All of them pretty recent, and none of them having native Linux versions. They all run using Proton. And Linux outperformed Windows on every game. But the average frame times were behind, which means the experience was not as consistent and smooth as on Windows. Still, it is a pretty interesting comparison. It's only 5 games and it's not going to reflect the general experience of every single game, obviously, but it's still awesome that with a translation layer, we're managing to run games that were made for Windows on Linux at better frame rates than on Windows itself. And the frame pacing issues are being worked on by Valve inside of SteamOS and Proton, which means that in the future, Linux might be actually the definitive better place to play games if they are supported. That's pretty insane to me. And if you want to prepare for that future, why not get a device that was made to run Linux in the first place, from our sponsor, Tuxedo. They make laptops, desktops, and NUCs that are built to run Linux natively. They ship those devices with Linux pre-installed. You have a selection of popular distros, but you can also just install your own, because in their testing, if they encounter bugs or issues, they actually submit patches upstream to fix all of them for everyone. They have a big range of devices. It should cover every price point and every need. All the devices can be customized with the various components, with your own keyboard layout, with your logo on the lid of your laptop, and they also let you open, repair, and upgrade all of their laptops. Tuxedo Computers is all I use these days. I run this channel on a Tuxedo InfinityBook Pro 16, which is also my editing station, and my gaming is done on the Tuxedo Cube, which has been turned into a SteamOS gaming console using Holo ISO. It's all really awesome, and I can only recommend them to you. So click the link in the description if you need a new computer and you want to run Linux on it. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, or to write a comment. And if you didn't like the video, there's always that thumbs down button and the comment section as well to let me know where I messed up. And if you want to support the channel, if you really enjoy what I do, there are plenty of links in the description of the video to do just that. You can also find links to other stuff that I do, including this exact same show, but in audio format, 45 minutes, more topics, more in depth. It's an audio podcast. You can also support it by using one of the Patreon links in the description. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!